Oh me oh my, the Game Awards are around the corner. Now, I don't normally concern myself with, general press release things like this. I mean, I'll keep tabs on official news straight from, Microsoft, Sony, Square, Nintendo, and etc. But in terms of overall general things like award ceremonies and stuff, I don't follow too much. To be honest, I didn't even know that, Game Awards was a thing until I heard that Breath of the Wild, Persona 5, and Mario Odyssey were all contenders for last year, and I was pretty shocked by that too. I was expecting some hardcore games like, Call of Duty or whatnot to just kind of take the cake for this kind of events, since those are, more mature themed. But I was so wrong, and that just kind of, reassures me in a weird way. Anyway, let's talk about it. The Game Awards are split into different sections, and I won't name all of them because oh boy, there is a lot. You have things like, general direction, like best audio performance, best, game design, just stuff like that. But basically, you see games like God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Spider-Man in the majority of the categories the most, with a few surprising games like Celeste and Detroit Become Human still sticking to it. Now, both of those games specifically are super good, but in light and comparison of God of War, Red Dead Redemption, and Spider-Man, and two of those of which have just recently been released, it's good to know that games like Celeste and Detroit are still fresh on people's minds. Now, as much as I do want to go in here and just talk about each game from each category and give my thoughts on the ones that I've played, here are my takes on the ones separately. I'm going to rate each game I've played on a scale of 1 to 5, and I would do 1 to 10, but I feel like that's kind of too big, especially because 5 is supposed to be the mediator there, so 5 is like decent, so 7 is like great, and 8, 9, and 10 are like beyond par. So I feel like, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's kind of weird. 1 to 5 is a lot more basic for me. So anyway, let's begin. Spider-Man has a nearly flawless design in terms of direction of story. Now, I'm a Marvel nerd, but even looking at this game from a non-Marvel perspective, it's absolutely great. Say what you will about it being a rip from the Arkham games, it's still superb. This game takes a toll on the player. You know right from the get-go that even though this game isn't decision-based with, alternate endings, each decision that you take as the player on behalf of both Peter Parker and Spider-Man's lives, it puts weight on you. When games make you feel the weight of a character behind them, it's fantastic. It's moving. It's emotional. It's wrenching. I love it so much. The design the studio took to perfect the little things too is beyond fantastic. They recorded different sets of audio for Peter's phone calls while he's swinging around. While you're swinging around, if you are, Peter will sound like he's, out of breath because he's moving a lot. But if you're stationary, then he's fine. He's talking normal. See, little things like this, along with the Marvel Easter eggs like Nelson and Murdoch and seeing the Jessica Jones and the Avengers Tower, things like that go out a very long way. And speaking of Easter eggs and cameos, I want to give my thoughts on the man Stan Lee. If you're sick of hearing Stan Lee and about his death, then I get it. So feel free to skip to the timestamp that's currently on the screen. But yeah, I just kind of want to pay my respects. Although I've never met him or had any sort of conversation with him, I'm merely a fan. He always was someone that I smiled at when I saw. He was always doing things for the virtuous reasons. He honored his legacy and his name as much as he loved and respected his fans, all without pride. The man is a legend. The characters and stories that he introduced into this world not only helped shape many people's childhoods, but their entire lives too. I'm so happy that I've gotten to live in a time with Stan Lee. He really was a hero. Moving on, the game's music score is also super nice too. Now, it's not something that I jam on, with Spotify, but I do consider myself immersed and engaged with the flow of the music as I play the game. Similar to how Breath of the Wild's music can scale up and down depending on what's going on in the environment around you, Spider-Man does the same while also leaving room for New York's noisy self to make itself known in a very pleasant way. The gameplay is another thing. It's definitely good and even great considering things for a Spider-Man game, but it feels repetitive, at least for me. There are different classes of enemies with different weaknesses. You learn what they all are pretty early on in the game. Aside from using your webs to mix up your combos, everything else is rather simple. Again, it's not bad, but I did notice myself always pushing for the same certain combo against a specific enemy or two. All things considered, I give Spider-Man a 4.5 out of 5. The direction, the characters, the story, all of it. Now, I know that I'm going to hear this in the comments or, just at another point in time, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. God of War. I've never played it, so I can't really give my thoughts on it. Now, I've heard that it's just as good, if not better, than Spider-Man. However, it also came out first and much, much earlier in the year, I believe. I think it actually came out back in March-ish, I think. Now, people went the entire summer without really a big AAA release, so Spider-Man was a good refresher, and with God of War still being compared to it, it simply shows that the game is still fresh months later, in terms of just how big the gaming industry is. It's kind of rare to see games stick around, especially AAA games, to stick around and be compared to one another later on in the year when, you have things like different consoles and software upgrades and different applications for consoles. Now, it's definitely not out of the ordinary because, again, we have these Game Awards, but I do find it remarkable that God of War wasn't one of the games that just kind of got pushed under the rug like some games typically do. So, yeah, it still kind of goes to show that God of War has performed so well that it's still fresh and it's still, on people's minds, new, I guess if you want to call it, when compared to things like Red Dead, Spider-Man, and etc. And the same can be said for other games too, but that's my thoughts on God of War. So for Detroit Become Human, I never actually bought this game, and I vaguely remember playing it. My experience with the game comes from a group of friends of mine who have actually been on my channel before. David, KG Ghost, Anthony from the Kingdom Hearts thing. Yeah. So whenever we would hang out, earlier in the year, the few of them would play it, and I think I just watched the majority of the time. I may have played, this one chapter or whatever. But anyways, I love decision-based games, but I could never really find one that was up my alley in terms of tone, depth, and overall narrative. Now, Detroit met that standard for me, and I loved it so much. The game takes a very political approach of, things like human rights and rights to do this and freedom and stuff like that, so which we somehow still unfortunately struggle with today. Controversy aside, the game's overall narrative and story is absolutely phenomenal. One of the neat perks about this game is that you can play as 3 different characters that all have different perspectives of how the plot shifts throughout the game. Now, being a decision-based game similar to Telltale games like that, certain characters can have specific consequences depending on what decisions you make. For example, some characters could die, some could hate you, some could love you, and Detroit is no exception to those things. Such events do happen. I'm not really going to, spoil it because it's a really good game that you just kind of got to play on your own. But yeah, so you play as these 3 different characters from different perspectives of the overall plot, yet they all do coincide while still having to deal and juggle around with the consequences of each character. So it is a lot, but it's good. It's really good. So anyway, I never did pay too much attention to the music of the game, so I can't really say anything for that. Now, what I have seen, or heard, I guess, are some mashups of Detroit Become Human's themes along with Undertale, but I'll just leave that as food for thought. Now, gameplay-wise, the game is, again, decision-based. There are consequences for your choices, be it right or wrong. Some things will get you killed, regardless if you pick the good or bad option. Sometimes you'll just die if you don't partake in an action. While I like these moments in terms of, philosophical and psychological courses of thought, I'm not too keen on the action moments when you have to actually do things and perform, a certain amount of actions within a specified or limited time in a specific manner. It's fine, but I prefer thinking, So, all in all, I give Detroit a 4 out of 5. So for Celeste, wow, to be honest, I'm kind of shocked that I'd be talking about any indie game amongst all of these AAA titles. Like, this is beyond bizarre for me, especially considering the fact that I didn't really partake in Game Award discussion last year, and the only thing I really heard about it was Persona 5, Mario Odyssey, and Breath of the Wild. So the fact that you go from those AAA titles to, things like Spider-Man, God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2, and then you throw in Celeste? Like, that's kind of mind-blowing in my opinion. But anyway, the fact that I am talking about this indie game in particular kind of proves that Celeste is a game that you should look into. Now, most of my thoughts on this game can be found in my Celeste versus Hollow Knight video, so if you're into those kind of things, then, be sure to check it out. It's good, I think, because it's my video, but yeah. In short, Celeste's narrative is to relate to the player. That's kind of the ultimate goal. You play as this girl named Madeline who decides to run away from her life stress and tries to prove that she's got things under control by scaling this mountain called Celeste. Along the way, you'll meet an old grandma who I don't actually think has a name that I think about it, but Theo the photographer, a dead Asian version of Mr. Mosby, and a reflection of your negativity known as part of Madeline. The conversations that the characters have back and forth about Madeline's goal reminds me a lot of, Kingdom Hearts' narrative of, having the good inside you kind of deal, that cheesy Disney kind of thing. Now, while it is cheesy to an extent, Celeste has a sense of realism to it, and again, its comparison and relatability with the player. Keep in mind, I've only talked about the story, and that's kind of a lot to take in for the story. The gameplay can easily be compared to speedrunning platformers like, Super Meat Boy, which I've never played, but if you're into games where you like dying a lot, Dark Souls, then you'll be comfortable with Celeste. Accomplishing each level gives you a sense of accomplishment, a reassurance that you can climb this mountain, that you can overcome the next level and obstacle in your path. And this is both exerted in both the gameplay and the plot. All in all, I give Celeste a 3 out of 5. I'm not really sure what could make that, score higher. Probably if it wasn't an indie game and if it was like 3D textured and there was more voice acting, or actually if there just was voice acting. But those are nitpicky things, and considering that it is an indie games don't typically have things like that, so I can't really judge it for that. So I'm judging it in the overall scale, which I do for all of these games. I give it a 3 out of 5. So it's still a great game, phenomenal. But moving on. I don't think you guys understand how much I've wanted to talk about Octopath Traveler for so long. This game is absolutely great. I love it. It is probably one of my favorites of this year, and probably one of my favorites in the past 5 years just in general. Now, it definitely does have its flaws, which I've talked about before, and overall, Octopath Traveler is just one of those games that keeps getting better as you play along, so the flaws that it does have, you kind of just have to push aside towards the beginning, and then the rest of it is just, it's going uphill from there, like all good things, right? So anyway, now I'm a sucker for classic turn-based RPGs games, like Octopath Traveler, so before the game even released, I was beyond excited to see how Square Enix, which is one of my favorite video game developers of all time, would reignite the genre with a sense of newness on next-gen consoles, and I was beyond pleased. Now, I didn't mention this in my previous Octopath videos, but for the first 40 hours or so of Octopath, my friends and I had a bit of a scaling issue. With the lack of knowledge about why the characters do what they do, things just felt forced and out of place, which is typical for, anything fantasy related. Things like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, some events just kind of have to happen in order for the plot to move forward. So things like this, especially for, fantasy RPGs, are typical, they're normal. But it felt even more forced when you compare it to other games in 2018, like Spider-Man or God of War. I mean, I've never played that, but still, you know the point. Once you actually immerse yourself into the game and its story, though, and you pay attention to all the things that the game wants you to pay attention to, the game easily becomes worth its $60 worth price. Yeah. At first, my friends and I were really taken back within the first 40 hours, with the way that the story was progressing. While the characters themselves were progressing through their own personal stories, we, as the players, weren't progressing alongside those characters because of issues like becoming too attached to a certain character, or trying to find where the lines and dots connected. We were too busy trying to see the grand scale of things, and even when we did, we got too comfortable with a specific character that we couldn't really appreciate everything for its overall narrative towards the beginning of the game, and I don't even think you really can just because of how scattered all the events and stuff are, which is fine. By the end of it, though, again, it's well worth its $60 price. Now, if you can get it for cheap, do it. I mean, I think that it's still worth, or it should be around the $40, price change. 60 is a good price for Octopath Traveler. It may be a bit much considering the first 30 or so hours can be dry in terms of the overall plot and narrative, but again, it's still good. Like, the payoff by the end of the game is worth the $60. But yeah, Octopath Traveler is the kind of game that I would play over and over and over and over again as a 12-year-old kid. And that's exactly what I did back, for games like Kingdom Hearts and for Pokemon. And I would totally do that if I could nowadays, but I'm busy. I'm trying to get a job, I'm finishing school, I'm applying for colleges, and I have other games to play, and I'm doing this, and I got other things to do, so anyway. There's so much nostalgia within Octopath Traveler. I'm trying my absolute hardest not to be just, completely blind by it. But all in all, I give Octopath a 4.5 out of 5. Okay, so similar to God of War, I just kind of have to talk about this because otherwise you guys are going to ask why I'm not talking about it. So, Fortnite. It's fine, I guess. I mean, I've played it a handful of times, and I can see why people do thoroughly enjoy the game. Now, don't get me wrong, it's definitely just as cringy, if not more, than, the 2011 Minecraft era, but it's fine, the game is fine, the people may vary, but yeah. I'm not really going to give it a scale because I don't need to. It's an online multiplayer game. One's own, rates and opinions and scale of multiplayer games like this depends on how they play it and view it from their experience with other people online. So, I mean, I can talk about how good Smash Bros. 4 is for its online play, but I can't really talk about how good Smash 64 is because of its online play because of lack thereof. So I can't really compare games like Octopath to games like Fortnite when Fortnite has no narrative and it's built completely on gameplay, whereas Octopath is built on both. It's just, the kind of genre that both games fit into. I don't think you can really give games like Fortnite a scale of how good it is because it more so depends on one's own experience, but yeah. Okay, so there are only 2 reasons why I'm talking about voice acting right now, and both of those reasons I've already talked about in this video. Yeah. That's SpiderMan and Detroit Become Human. So, boy. Both games have voice actors that I loved in their respective games. That's right. I'm talking about Yuri Lowenthal? I think that's how you pronounce it. As Peter Parker, and Brian Detchert? Detchert? As Connor. Comparing the two, I think I like Yuri's performance better, probably just because Peter is an actual character I can sympathize with, while the plot of Detroit Become Human, Detroit Becomes Human, makes it easy to sympathize with characters like Connor. A few of the actual paths that you can take in the game make it hard. Now, I think that that's still an extremely well done thing on the devs, side of things, being able to, tap into the realm of realism of each scenario with these characters. Regardless, I'm also a Marvel fanatic, and Spider-Man is my favorite hero, so I'll totally admit the bias here. Secondly, I don't see Yuri as active with his game as I do Brian. I constantly see videos of Brian playing through the game, and even he's shocked by how the game turned out with its overall narrative and you know, how they just kind of put the game together, and he even acted in it, which I think goes to show that it's pretty good. Brian just seems like a great guy and character in and out of the game, and I really, really like him for that, but I love them both for their performance in and, I guess, outside the game. So as for the voice actors themselves, I'm giving them both a 4 out of 5. I would totally vote for them both if I could, but I had to pick one, and I'm not going to say which one I did because it hurts me because I wanted to vote for the other one too. Oh, God. And yeah, that's about it. That's all I got. So I'm recording this video, you know, mid-November. I think actually Red Dead Redemption 2 came out last week or a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks, but if the world doesn't end within the next 2 or 3 weeks, then this video should release just a few hours before the actual Game Awards ceremony itself, you know, before it begins. So hopefully you guys can get in some last-minute speculation and discussion with this video. But yeah, so this video is pretty much over. If you want to, you know, click out of here and leave a like, then thanks. But for the last, or yeah, for the next 2-3 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk about next year's games. So here's your PSA. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so for next year, I really do wonder what games that we know about that are going to be on the board for next year. Well, for fighting games and for, you know, family games and stuff, there's obviously Smash Brothers. Pokemon may fit into that. I don't know. Pokemon, the main series Pokemon game coming out next year definitely will. I'm more so worried about Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu, because with those games coming out as close as they are to Smash, I'm really worried if those games are really even going to do well. I mean, I know that they're going to get good amount of sales just because it's Pokemon, but in terms of, you know, when it's releasing and in terms of everything else that's released close to it, I mean, I feel like a lot of Pokemon sales are just going to come out of the fact that it's A, Pokemon, and B, the holiday season. Which I mean, that second thing doesn't really support the game. It more so hurts it because it kind of shows that the game won't be able to survive past it, but that's just my thoughts. Kingdom Hearts 3 in January, it probably will be, you know, in the Game Awards section at some point, maybe for music, because Kingdom Hearts is known to have really good music. I love it. It may be for music, it may be for Game of the Year, I don't know. I'm sure it'll be on there in some form or capacity. Now, in terms of Game of the Year, that's really debatable. I mean, Kingdom Hearts 3 ends this whole 18, no, actually it's been 16. It ends this whole 16-year-long saga that we've played through since the PlayStation 2. So, unless you've been with the series, there's not really a whole lot of reason that you should play it, and therefore, if you should not play a game, then there's not really much reason for you to buy it, and therefore, if you don't buy it, then sales don't do well. Now, I don't know. I mean, the game may do really well. It probably will, just because it's a PlayStation. Well, it's not a PlayStation 4 exclusive. Excuse me. It's it's PlayStation and Xbox. It's a JRPG. Kingdom Hearts does have a huge fan base. So I don't think sales are more so the problem. It's just, I guess, relevancy. You know, like from the release of Kingdom Hearts 3 to next year's Game Awards. There's 10 months. So that's 10 months for Nintendo to show off Metroid Prime 4, for Pokemon 2019, a lot of new Smash stuff, Travis Strikes Again, new Ninjala, and that's just from Nintendo. I'm sure that Microsoft probably has a few things up their sleeves. I don't know. I don't follow Microsoft religiously. Sony might have a few new things. Still concerning Square Enix, there's the Avengers project. We still have yet to see Final Fantasy VII. That's not coming out next year, though, so there's not really a whole lot of point in talking about that. What other games are coming out next year? I don't know. I mean, there's always, you know, sport games and stuff that release every year or every other year, but that's about that. But yeah, so for next year, the top contenders, I mean, there's obviously the games that we know about, and then there's the games that we don't know about. Travis will be a good indie game. It'll be up there in terms, you know, like Celeste is this year. Now, again, Celeste really did shock me. I was not expecting Celeste to be remotely in the ballpark. Now, it was a critically acclaimed game. I know that a lot of, you know, different news outlets and stuff praised it during its release, but I just felt like it was going to be one of those games that just died down, you know, like it has a week or two of hype and then it stopped, you know, just like some games and some trends and stuff do. But I'm super glad to see that it still kind of has some traction, which is kind of ironic considering I did a video on it last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever this, it should be 2 weeks ago, yeah. So, well, what else? There's, I don't know. Kingdom Hearts 3 being on the top of the chart is weird. I mean, I'm sure it will be in some capacity again, because again, its music score is going to be great. It's more so just the game itself, because Kingdom Hearts has a lot of issues that a lot of people both know and refuse to know or acknowledge. So I don't know. I feel like it's one of those make or break kind of things. If the community makes or breaks its chance into being in the Game of the Year stuff, but nah, I don't know. I think Pokemon's the 2019 Pokemon title, Pokemon Switch, is definitely going to be in top contender no matter what. There was, I believe, a rumor going around about a new Zelda game. We still don't obviously have any official word on that. And then again, Metroid Prime 4, I could see that probably coming out next October, with some sort of trailers coming out no later than March by next year, but that's stretching it. I really don't think that they had any development done when they first announced it in 2017. I think that they just, stated, let's work on this game. And then they started working on it a year ago. And I think it takes a little bit more than a year to make a game from scratch up. But anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts on next year. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. This is Jake logging out. Peace. By the way, I think that SpiderMan should win this year's Game of the Awards. So, yeah.